Hi, my name is Rohan Chopra. Welcome to Edumont classes. Today we'll be talking about ABC, activity-based costing. Before we get into detail of ABC, if you're referring to your books, this is topic 2.4. Now, with that being said, before we get into the details of ABC, I want to talk about costing. Traditional costing, to be precise. What exactly is the reason why we want to do any costing? हमें क्यों ज़रूरत पड़ रही है करने की? So, if I was to build a product, manufacture a product, I would require three basic things. I would need direct material, direct labor, and I would then incur some overheads. Overheads are expenses which are not material, which are not labor, but are required in the manufacturing process. For example, I pay rent on my factory. So let's say I pay rent. Yearly rent is $10,000. So I paid $10,000 rent, or I am going to pay $10,000 rent. This amount is fixed. I know about it क्योंकि मेरे पास agreement है, मेरे पास contract है that I've signed with my landlord. So I know my factory rent is 10,000. Now here's why I need costing. I know that I'm going to incur this chunk of cost, but this is related to production. And I want to recover the cost of my production from my customer. मेरे प्रोडक्ट की जो कॉस्ट है, प्रोडक्शन करते हुए जो कॉस्ट लगी मेरे प्रोडक्ट में, वो कस्टमर से रिकवर होगी. Now I have $10,000 in cost. I know that much. So this is a cost to me. That's a given. But how do I charge this cost to an individual customer? Now problem ये होती है कि I don't know मेरे पास साल में कितने कस्टमर आएंगे. Because business is volatile. You can't predict these things. तो मेरे को नहीं पता कि कितने लोग आएंगे मेरे पास in a year. मुझे ये भी नहीं पता कि कितने प्रोडक्ट्स मैं बना पाऊंगा. I have a target in mind, sure, that I want to produce say 2,000 pens or 2,000 units, but I can't be certain because production is dependent on machines not breaking down, on people performing their daily tasks, on nature being kind and not having any disasters. There are a lot of things that my production is dependent upon. So I can't necessarily identify how many products I will produce. What I can do is I can make a budget, and so I shall. So like I said, I had a target in mind. मेरे को 5,000 units बनाने हैं, और मुझे पता है कि हर यूनिट को बनाने में 1 hour लगता है. So I need to be working for 5,000 hours. So this is now my goal, 5,000 labor hours. So under traditional costing system, ये rent जो है इसको डिवाइड कर दो by 5,000 hours. This 5,000 or direct labor hours is what we would call cost driver. This is a cost driver. As a result, मेरे पास जो रेट आ जाएगा, which is 2 per hour or $2 per hour, this is my predetermined overhead rate, or PDOH. Don't worry if you don't understand these things. They're covered in a lot more detail in sections 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. We're jumping straight to 2.4. But with that being said, ये जो रेट आ गया, अब मेरे को ये पता चल जाता है इससे कि कस्टमर से क्या चार्ज करना है. So let's say I make different products. मैंने एक रेड मार्कर बनाया, और रेड मार्कर को बनाने में 2 hours लग गए. फिर मैंने एक ब्लू मार्कर बनाया. ब्लू मार्कर के लॉट में 3 hours लग गए. और लास्टली मैंने एक ब्लैक वाला मार्कर बनाया, which was the easiest to do. It took only 1 hour. Now I know each job has different times. But because I calculated everything on an hourly basis, what I will do is I'll say 2 hours into 2 into 2 into 2. तो सबके रेट निकल आएंगे 4, 6 और 2. तो जब ब्लैक मार्कर बेचने जाऊंगा, अगर इसकी कॉस्ट 10 रुपये पड़ रही थी तो रेंट मिलाकर इसकी कॉस्ट 12 हो जाएगी. Similarly, if I go and sell the red markers, if they were for $10 to manufacture, with the rent included, they're now for $14. So as a result, I have been able to distribute my 10,000 on a product-wise basis using direct labor hours. This is traditional costing. And in traditional costing, we use a single cost driver. Mane? Under a traditional costing system, it doesn't matter what cost you are dividing. It could be rent, it could be plant utilities, it could be material handling charges. It doesn't matter. All costs will be divided with one single cost driver, and usually that single cost driver is direct labor hours, because direct labor hours are still in so many ways predictable. कितने घंटे मैं काम करूंगा ये मैं बजट प्रेडिक्ट कर सकता हूं कुछ हद तक, which is why we use direct labor hours. Now this is fine, this is all right. Traditional costing works just fine if you have one product. What if you have two products? Or like we said, we've got 3 products. And one of those products is labor intensive while the other is capital intensive. If you were to keep dividing costs on the basis of labor hours, direct labor hours के basis पे, तो जो labor intensive product है उसको cost सारी मिल जाएगी maximum, और जो capital intensive है उसने पैसा तो ज़्यादा इस्तेमाल किया है, capital intensive है वो, but its cost that gets allocated to it would be a fraction of what it really is supposed to get. Which is why we use activity based costing. Now, I'd like to explain to you activity based costing in greater detail, and I'd like to get into the details using an example. So if you refer to your book or simply look at the screen right now, we have an example brought up for you. I'm going to read through the example, then I'm going to rub the board, and then we'll discuss this in great detail. It says sample company is an audio speaker manufacturer company that manufactures 2 products, super bass speakers and super clear speakers. Currently they use a traditional cost accounting system and apply overheads to their products based on direct labor hours. So traditional costing system hai, direct labor hours is our cost driver. By the way, what is a cost driver? If you're unfamiliar with the term, it's a common term, but if you're unfamiliar with it, cost driver is like a car driver. Car driver का काम है गाड़ी को आगे बढ़ाना, cost driver का काम है cost को आगे बढ़ाना. So cost जिस चीज़ की वजह से बढ़ती जा रही है वो cost driver हो जाता. Now, coming back to our example here, the direct labor hours used during the year were 220,000 hours for super bass speakers, 280,000 hours for super clear speakers. Okay, so I'm going to start rubbing the board and penning down these details. Okay, seem to have dirtied the board more, but that's all right, as long as everything is visible. Okay, so I'm going to start penning this down. So we've got 2 products, super bass speakers and super clear speakers. Okay, another pro tip I'd like to give you guys is when you're solving a major problem like this one, especially in the CPA exams, don't care about the names all that much. It doesn't really matter. So it was William Shakespeare who said it, what's in the name? That applies here. नाम से कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. So I would call this product A and product B if it makes my life easier, and that's what I'm going to do exactly here. I'm going to call this product A and product B, and product A is S. Okay, super bass speakers, SBS, and this is SCS, super clear speakers. But again, doesn't matter. We could just call it product A, product B. Let's note down the details. So first things first is direct labor hours, and I've already been given this information. So DLH is 220,000 for product A and 280,000 for product B. Other than that, I've been told they are considering converting to an activity based costing system. Below is the estimated data for the 10th year of their operations. You've got different costs. Material handling. So if you look at the board here, we've got these activities already mentioned. Now we're going to talk about their costs. So we've got $480,000 for material handling, $60,000 for the production orders that you've placed, $800,000 for all of the product redesigns that we went under, and plant utilities were worth $460,000. That brings the total to 1.8 million, right? That's my total cost. Now, I also have some other detail that has been mentioned to me. I'm just going to quickly note it down, and then we'll discuss why it's relevant. We'll talk about pounds. So product A uses 40,000 pounds of material, and product B uses 20,000 pounds of material. So by pounds we mean its weight, right? Pounds lbs. And then number of production orders, so I'll just say orders on the board here. We've got 200 and 400 orders. Then we've got changes, number of changes, we've got 10 here and we've got 30 here. And lastly we've got machine hours. 150,000 machine hours here and 50,000 machine hours here. Right. Now, let's start with the traditional costing system first, and then we'll talk about ABC. So traditional costing. So under the traditional costing system, I'll write system as well, you know. I've got all of the costs here of 1.8 million. And I've got my direct labor hours, which is what I've been instructed per the example is what we use. So we use direct labor hours and this. So the costing would be fairly simple, fairly easy to perform. I would say 1.8 million divided by a total of 500,000, which brings me to 3.6 per direct labor hour per DLH. So now I have to assign the costs to the products. So I know my per hour rate. I also know the number of hours for labor used. तो बड़ा simple हो जाता है. I say product A $220 into 3.6 and product B is equal to 280,000 into 3.6. Now this will give me the total cost, but I don't just want the total cost, I want the per unit rate. Per unit पे क्या लगाना है ये point है, total cost नहीं चाहिए सिर्फ मुझे. So I'm going to have to then divide this by their production volume, and I have not noted down the production volume, so I'm going to do that now. First thing that we've been told is production volume is 50,000 and 25,000. So product A production volume is 50,000 and this is 25,000. So in this case I want to go 220 into 3.6 divide by 50,000 divide by 25,000, and this will give me my per unit rate. Now I'm not going to actually do the calculations here, they've already been done for us. I'm just going to simply copy it. That's $15.84, correct? 15.84 and $40.32. Now this is relevant from our standpoint, and as such we'll keep these two numbers parked here for now, and then we will come back and do a comparison. Now very quickly let's talk about activity based costing and how we would solve the same problem, how we would bring down a per unit cost for all of these activities to the products. Now activity based costing says each activity is done for its own reason, and each activity should have its own cost driver. So we've got material handling, right? Now I'm incurring costs for handling material, raw material specifically. So the best cost driver for this is the amount of material I've used. So I would then go material handling. For this I would say pounds or LBS, pounds of material. If I talk about production orders, a good cost driver for production order is number of orders. For product redesign, the number of changes I've had, because you make changes and that costs you to spend money on product redesign. So I would say number of changes. And then lastly, you've got plant utilities. So for utilities, machine hours is the best cost driver for us. And I'll tell you why. मशीन चल रही है इसीलिए बत्ती लग रही है, मशीन चल रही है इसलिए पानी खर्च हो रहा है, राइट? यूटिलिटीज जो हैं, बत्ती पानी के खर्चे आर बिकॉज ऑफ द टाइम आई एम टेकिंग टू प्रोड्यूस. मशीन आवर्स इज द परफेक्ट एग्जांपल फॉर दैट. सो विल टेक मशीन आवर्स. सो एक्टिविटी बेस्ड कॉस्टिंग ये कह रही है कि आप हर कॉस्ट को उसकी एक्टिविटी के बेसिस पे उसके कॉस्ट ड्राइवर से कैलकुलेट करो. Now, I'm going to quickly give these guys numbers. I'll use the blue pen for this. So I'll say this is number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'll do the calculations on the board there. So, now comes in the point of activity-based costing, right? ABC. So under the ABC system, how will things work? Let's quickly do this then. Let's take a look at this. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and you also have 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 cost drivers, 4 costs. Now I'm simply going to divide the two. That's it. So for number 1, we've got 60,000 pounds and we've got 480. So number 1 becomes $480,000 spent on 60,000 pounds of material. Number 2, you've got $60,000 spent on production orders for a total of 600 orders. Then there's number 3. You've got $800,000 spent on product redesigns over 40 changes. Wow, that's massive. Massive spending on product redesign. I'll get to that in a second. And then number 4 is machine hours. Plant utilities are $460,000 for a total of 200,000 hours. So the rates are as $8 per order, so the rates are $8 per order, $100. Sorry, that's $8 per pound. I wrote order, my bad. That is $8 per pound per order, and this is 2.3 per hour. Right. So these are now my rates. So instead of having a unified rate, like in this case we had a unified rate of 3.6 per direct labor hour. Now we've got 4 separate rates. But the rest of the process is still the same. Very simple, right? What I'll do now is I will simply find out the costs by multiplying the rates with the usage. So I'll go product A and product B. Now for product A and for product B, I've got 8 per pound into 40,000 pounds. I've got 8 per pound into 20,000 pounds. That's number one. Number two, I've got $100 per order into 200 orders. $100 per order into 400 orders. Number three, 20,000 spent per change into 10 changes. $20,000 spent per change into 30 changes. And then there's number four, machine hours, utilities, $2.3 spent per hour over 150 hours. And $2.3 spent again over 50,000 remaining hours, right? Now, without having to go through the agony of doing the math here, I'm going to simply look at my sheet and fill in the details. So, if we were to total all of these up, you would find the total is $655,000 versus 1.14500. Right. Yeah. These are the costs. So if you look at these two numbers and add them together, they would still equal the 1.8 million. They would still be worth the 1.8 million because all I've done is I've divided the 1.8 million between the two products. But again, dividing the cost is not the point. Dividing the cost on a per unit basis is the point. So let's do this on a per unit basis now. Let's divide this by the number of units they have, and I've written the production volume. The rate is 50,000 units for this and 25,000 units for this, which gives me a per unit rate, if I'm not mistaken, of 13.10 and $46.80. Is that correct? That is correct. Good. These are my rates. Now, finally, we have calculated a new cost per unit. Now let's look at these two numbers that we have: 15.84, 40.32 versus 1310 and 4680. Now, if you've already understood from the context, that's great, but let me spell it out explicitly. The idea is you thought product A, which was the highest selling product you have, which is why you produced 50,000 units of it, was worth 15.84, or it costed you 15.84. When the truth of it is you have an advantage there, it costed you 1310. On the flip side, you thought product B, which sells in lower quantities and is being produced in lower quantities as well, costs 40.32. When the truth of the matter is it is expensive, it costs 46.80, which is close to $47. So you've been giving away a product B, at a lower cost, and where you had an advantage, which is product A, where you could sell a lot more quantities at a lot lower prices because your actual cost is 1310, you were charging yourself more under a traditional costing system. If you think about it, this is because product B isn't as labor intensive, but it is a lot more capital intensive. So while this uses 220,000 hours, this uses 280, it uses a little bit more, agreed, but it uses a lot more capital. Best example of this is, look at this. The biggest number we have on the board here is 20,000 per change. If you look at the 4 rates here, that's the biggest rate we've got. Now, the super clear speakers need 30 changes a year, vis-a-vis only 10 changes needed by the product which is selling in larger quantities. So, another great advantage of ABC is the fact that you can identify your value added and non-value added services, and you can look at them with a clear lens. तो value added service क्या होती है? Value added service ये होगी कि if there is an activity, value-added activity, that I am performing, it will add value to the product. So my product is a marker. For example, if I have a person who comes in and closes the cap every time, that's a value added thing because value is being added here. Without the cap, this thing would dry up and you wouldn't be able to use it. So value has been added here. But a non-value added activity would be an activity where the marker, the product, the speaker is not improving in any way. It's just being done because it's required. For example, material handling on the board here. I could make a case that it's not a value added activity because you're handling material, that's fine, and you need to handle your material so that you have it in the right space when you need it for production. But at the same time, it doesn't add any value to the marker, to the product that we're building, or to the speaker that we're selling here. The speakers don't sound any better because material has been handled well or poorly. So with that being said, the idea is with ABC costing, you can identify which areas are a drain of your capital. And the best example for this is $20,000 per change for product redesign. Now you need to identify if product redesign is actually adding value. Does every redesign add value to the product? Sometimes we're just redesigning the outer layers of it. Sometimes we're redesigning the product from the core. You got to figure out if this is a value added activity or not. And if it's not a value added activity, you'd like to eliminate it. And if you can't eliminate it, you'd like to at least reduce it. This is why activity based costing is a much more advanced costing system than a traditional costing system, where you're just looking at one single cost driver. But in activity based costing, because every cost has its own cost driver, and the costs are being allocated with such precision, you get the best insights into your business. With that, I could conclude this topic now safely. Thank you for watching. I hope you understood this topic. I hope you have a great day as well. Bye-bye.